All right, so today I want to talk about mouthwashing. The premise of this game is that you follow the story of this crew on a delivery ship, like a space delivery ship. They work for the Pony Express, and their ship is the Tulpar, and there's five people on this crew, that being Curly, Anya, Jimmy, Swansea, and Daisuke. Basically, what happens is they have an impact with the meteor, um, and you follow this story throughout the game from after the crash and before the crash, and it kind of shows you what's been going on between them. I actually really enjoyed playing this game. The atmosphere was really good, like the visuals were really good, and like the music and stuff, and they did a good job being like horror-y and like being like it's not like jump scary necessarily. There might be like a couple here and there, but like the vibes are really good. The game is disturbing when it's trying to be disturbing, and it's also like spooky when it's supposed to be spooky, but that's not necessarily the whole game. Kind of as you're going through it, because they had this crash happen, you know they're low on resources, and their options are to try and survive as long as possible, um, in order to be found by the Pony Express company, but you're kind of uncertain that'll ever happen, and people start to lose their minds throughout their journey in the story. Yeah, but I feel like the music, the visuals, like the graphics are like really nice. Like I like the art direction on it. It feels like an old PS1 game kinda, and the game's also not very long. It just took me like 2.5 hours or something to finish, so that was kind of nice to play the short, like concise story. They really play on like perspectives in this game. Yeah, basically throughout the game you play as two characters mainly. You usually play as Jimmy or Curly, depending on if you're before or after the crash. And you kind of see things through like their different perspectives. And as you play through, you kind of start to realize that like not everything is as solid as it seems. Like some people on the crew are going a little crazy, and it really gets to them as they run out of resources and stuff. And like Curly is like basically a paraplegic. He like cannot move at all. All he is like an eyeball on flesh. And like Anya is like keeping him alive, because like Anya's the nurse, so Curly's the captain, Jimmy's the co-pilot, Anya is the nurse, Swansea's the mechanic, and Daisuke is the mechanic's assistant. I want to talk about the story now, and I'm probably gonna get into some spoilers here, so uh, be warned. But the story starts out, and you're in the cockpit of the ship, and the ship is about to crash into a meteor, or into an asteroid belt or whatever. And the person you're playing as right then is trying to crash the ship into the meteor. And they end up doing that, right? And then the crash happens. And then it's kind of unclear who you play as at first, but after the crash happens, you end up, it's like 2 months later after the crash, and you end up at this table where Anya, Swansea, and Daisuke are sitting, and also your character, and you find out you're playing as Jimmy from like talking to the other characters. And you find out that Curly got hurt from the impact, so Anya took care of him, and basically he's just like a bunch of flesh, like burned up and like wrapped together. Only thing that he can really control is his eyeball. Um, and so the crew is at the table, the four of them. They're trying to talk what to do. And this is kind of where you meet like the crew and like start to figure out their dynamics. And that's one thing about the game is like as you play through, you see the dynamics between the people, and it's kind of subtle, like some things, some of the relationships with others. But it starts to show more as you like play through the game. Um, and it's not really clear who you play as in the beginning, like who crashes the ship. But as you play, they talk about Carly, and they're like, we need to help Curly or whatever. Like Jimmy's like, oh, I don't know why he would crash the ship. They're like, yeah, like we can't let him die though. Like we gotta take care of him. And then Jimmy's like, I'm gonna be the captain now. So Jimmy takes over the captain role, and then from there, your first task really is to like find the scanner, and you've got to find the code scanner. So usually only the captain has that. They're trying to figure out what is in their cargo bay, and so they need the code scanner for that. And they want to figure out like what they're delivering because they're low on supplies. It's been like months after the crash, and they need like whatever they can get. So you go find the code scanner, and they end up opening like their cargo bay, and they find out that what they have is like a bunch of mouthwash. It plays this crazy like mouthwash commercial, which is like kind of fun. um but yeah, they find out they have a bunch of mouthwash, and they're like, what the heck, like they're hoping for like food or medicine or something like useful to them, and they're like, what do we do with the mouthwash? So Swansea, he is like, he starts drinking that shit, starts downing that shit right away, and he's like, I've been sober for 15 years, like now it's time for me to drink or whatever. Like you can't really blame him. He bro is like stranded on this ship, with no other option. Like she's gonna go crazy anyways, and everyone else is like kind of bummed out too, and they're like, oh, what do we do? Most of the levels in this are like, it's mainly one level. Like you're mainly going around the ship, you seeing the same spots, but you see them through different times of the story and from different perspectives. So it's kind of interesting to see, like you get familiar with the ship, and then you like see the differences over time. But yeah, they find the mouthwash, and then you gotta feed Curly his like pain medicine or whatever. Anya usually does it, but she's kind of like scared. She's not scared, but she's just having a hard time doing it like all the time. So she asked Jimmy to do the medicine. And Jimmy's like, yeah, sure, whatever. So he starts putting the medicine. You got to open up Curly's mouth and then put the medicine in him. And whenever you do this, the screen fades to black, and you just hear like him in pain, and it's pretty disturbing actually. Um, but yeah, so that happens, and then you also get to, so like after the crash, you play as Jimmy, and then you also get the perspective from Curly from before the crash. So um, it cuts out between the two, and as Curly, you start playing before, like it's like days before the crash, and I think one of the first things you do is like you go talk to like Anya, and like see the how the psych evaluations are doing, or like she has to do a psych eval on you, I think. Um, and since she's the nurse, she has to take care of the psych evaluations. And then she's like, oh, like there's only one left, like I gotta go talk to Jimmy, like can you do it? And Curly's like, sure, like I can do it. I was like, yeah, I can go do the evaluation for Jimmy. So you go talk to Jimmy. He's in the cockpit, you find him there, and you start doing the psych evaluation. And like Curly's like, yeah, like this all seems fine, like whatever. And then they do that, and then they have a little talk, right? So they have this talk, and Jimmy's like, hey man, like everyone talks about how great of a pilot you are, like you're cemented here, you're so good. And he's coming off a little jealous, and they're talking off the record now because like they do evaluation, and then Curly's like, okay, like off the record, like tell me how you're doing, man. And he's like showing a little jealousy. He's being a little like confrontational. um but it just kind of goes on. And then sometimes when you like play as Jimmy in like the modern time, not the modern time, but like after the impact, like sometimes he starts hallucinating. So you have these like psych evals, and then you see that he's like starting to hallucinate when you're playing as him, and you're like, oh, like this guy's kind of off his gourd a little bit. um he only starts to get worse. But then again, everyone's kind of off their gourd just because of their like situation when they're like stranded on this like express delivery space service. And when you're playing as Curly, he's also like going around, he makes sure the crew's okay, but he gets this notice and from their like company, and it's saying that they're all being laid off. And he goes to tell them, and when he goes to tell the crew, they it turns out they're holding a surprise birthday party for everyone since they're only allowed one birthday party on their like at their work. So they're doing a surprise birthday party, and he's like, "Oh man!" And you're tasked with like making a cake. So you make the cake, and then you tell them the news. And Jimmy's like, "What the fuck, man? Like this is fucked up." He's like, "I don't have shit back home, you know. Like life sucked down there for me." And then he's like, "Yeah, what's Anya gonna do? Like Anya's a terrible nurse." And you're like, "Whoa, dude, chill." And he's like, yeah, like everything's so laid out for you. He's like Swansea's life sucked, and like Daisuke can't do shit. You know, like Jimmy's hella pissed because it kind of ruined the mood. But Curly's like, sorry, man. Like this is what you gotta do. You know, this is what happened. And I actually found this in a like Reddit comment. That apparently the note he gets telling them they're laid off, you don't actually get to see it, but apparently everyone except Curly gets laid off. So he gets promoted or something, and that's kind of what Jimmy's hinting at. He's like, "Oh, you're gonna move on from us? Like, you're just gonna leave us here? Like, what the heck, bro?" So they find out the news that they're getting laid off, and that kind of sucks for everyone. He plays Jimmy some more. He hallucinates some shit. And he's going around, he's trying to be a captain, like taking care of stuff. He's like trying to get things fixed or whatever. Yeah, after the crew finds out they're getting laid off, that's kind of when things get a little unhinged. So this is from Curly's perspective, and you're playing before the impact. And at this point, like you're still thinking like, oh, like Jimmy said Curly crashed the ship, and you're like, why would Curly do that, you know? And you're playing. So you do some tasks like Daisuke gets caught up in some foam or whatever while they were like messing around in the mechanic bay or with the cryopod bay because they have cryopods on the ship. And Swansea's like trying to get him out, but he's like, I don't have the code for the axe. So they get Curly to come. Curly scans the code, gets the axe out for Swansea, and from here on out, Swansea is always carrying the axe. They use it to like cut the foam, but he's just in charge of it. So like Curly talks to Anya, and you find out that Anya is actually pregnant, um, and she's kind of worried about that. And Curly is like, "What the fuck? Like, who did that?" And Anya's like, "You know who did it." And for me, it's a little ambiguous, but like you can kind of tell who it is from like some subtext and stuff. Um, so he's like I've known him a long time. He's talking about Jimmy because apparently Jimmy's the father of Anya's baby. And he's like, I'll fix this. And then you like try and talk to Jimmy about it. He's like, oh, like you got a lot to take care of soon. And Jimmy's like kind of ignoring him. Because Anya tells Jimmy about the baby, and then he just like apparently Jimmy just walks away and he just ignores it. So Curly kind of confronts him. Curly talks to Anya, and she's like, "Oh, what happened when you told Jimmy?" And she's like, "Oh, he just walked away like he always does." So then Curly confronts him. He's like, "Oh, you know, you got like big things coming." He's like, "Yeah, I guess so." And Jimmy's still kind of like ignoring it. Especially cuz like um Jimmy allegedly like sexually assaulted Anya because she's like, why are there no locks in the sleeping quarters, but they're in the med bay? Because she kind of spends the whole game in the med bay because she wants to stay away from Jimmy. Um, so it's implied that Jimmy sexually assaulted Anya, and also he has like no care at all for the baby. Um, Anya ends up like taking the gun at some point and she's like hiding it. So just so Jimmy doesn't have it because usually it's in the cockpit, but she ends up hiding it in the med bay. Um, and you confront her about that as Curly, and you're like, Anya, like I need the gun, and she's like, no, like I hid the gun because like I don't want him having it. Like I'm not gonna use it. I just don't want Jimmy having it. And Curly's kind of understanding. He's like, yeah, okay, like I get you. Yeah, Anya's also like whenever you're playing as Jimmy, you don't really notice this at first, but as you play through and you kind of think back on it, you kind of realize like Anya's a little like uncomfortable around Jimmy all the time, but you're playing as Jimmy, so it's a little thing you just gotta like notice once you figure out what's going on. So the days after the crash, like months after the crash, like Curly's still messed up. Swansea is guarding the cryo chambers. He's like, it's foamed up. Like, you guys cannot go there. If we break the foam, the whole ship's gonna go bad. We're gonna die. Um, and he will not let anyone go there. And Daisuke is like, he's like, oh, okay, like, sure, man, like, whatever you say, Swansea. And Swansea told him to guard the kitchen, so he goes to the kitchen. And then Jimmy's kind of like, um, he gets worried about Anya. At this point, Anya has locked herself into the med bay with Curly. All right. So at this point, you've fed him like 2 or 3 pain meds or whatever, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna run out." So Anya has locked herself in the med bay, and the only way through to there is like these vents that have been closed the whole game. And Swansea says, "Don't go in there. Like that shit's dangerous," you know. Um, and you're playing as Jimmy. You want to get into the med bay to check on Anya, right? And then you convince um, Daisuke to come help you because you're like, surely there's a way in there, you know? And he's like, sure. And then but the problem is the vent in the med bay goes into the cryo chamber, which Swansea is guarding, and he says it's blocked off. And so Jimmy's plan is to make a like this really strong drink because Swansea loves to drink. He's just mouthwash all over the game. And they make this really strong drink with like the resources they have. And Daisuke's kind of unsure. He's like, I don't know about this, but Jimmy's like, come on, bro, like just do this, man. Daisuke kind of helps you a little bit. He's watching you do shit. But you give the drink to Swansea, and he's like, okay, man, sure. And then because the drink like knocks him out, Swansea gets really pissed later on, especially because he has an axe too. But basically, you knock out Swansea, and then you go into the cryo chamber. And in the cryo chamber, you find out it's not blocked off. Like there's some goo there or whatever, but it's actually like pretty much usable. And Swansea's been lying to you the whole time about it being locked off. One of the cryo chambers is still like usable too. And you're like, whoa, that's weird. And Daisuke's like, yeah, that's kind of weird. Daisuke's like, oh, like, I can't believe Swansea's been working on this the whole time. And Jimmy's like, no, dude, like, he's been lying to us. Um, yeah, Daisuke's, he's a baller, bro. He's just like, oh man, Swansea's been hard at work. um, yeah, and then you get Daisuke to go up the ladder into the vent that goes to the med bay, and he ends up making it, but he ends up in a ton of pain. He gets like cut up and shit because you hear his screams and whatever. But he ends up making it to the med bay, and then you go to the med bay, and Daisuke is like fucked up. You gotta like put him on a cot, and then like try and take care of him. He's like super messed up, and you see like when you're in the med bay, you see that Anya has a bunch of pills in her hand. She's like killed herself. Um, she OD'd, and Curly's still just laying there. So Curly still like can't really do anything. Again, he's basically like incapable of anything except moving his eyeball. Um, and then you like go take care of Daisuke, and you're like looking for meds and stuff, and then like Swansea's like trying to help you too. And Swansea's like, "What the fuck, bro?" Like once he wakes up, he's like, "What the fuck, bro? Like I told you guys to stay away from that. Like why didn't you listen?" Um, and Jimmy starts to feel kind of guilty, and you can tell through these like visions he has because he has like these visions throughout the game, especially with some flashes. He like it like flashes to him to like take responsibility and shit, and like he just has crazy things he sees sometimes. Um, but yeah, Jimmy and Swansea try to take care of Daisuke and like help him like get better to an extent, but they have trouble doing so. So Swansea ends up like talking to Daisuke a little bit. And he's like, "Oh man, like I wish you hadn't like been here. Like you didn't deserve to be here or whatever, you know. And then Swansea ends up he picks up the axe and he ends up whacking Daisuke with it. He ends up killing him with it, and you're like, oh fuck, like he just killed Daisuke, like, and him and Jimmy are like, dude, like he's just trying to put him out of his pain, you know. So it just is what it is. But Swansea's also pissed at Jimmy, so um, Swansea starts like chasing Jimmy around. At least that's kind of what I got. It's kind of hard to tell with how some of the scenes go in the game. Swansea starts to chase Jimmy around with the axe, because there's a part where you like run away from him, and there's another part where you like are like shooting him, and Jimmy finds the gun eventually. So he gets the gun, especially once because it was in the med bay. Anya had it. You see her when she like overdosed. So you get the gun, and then Swansea starts chasing Jimmy. Um, and you have to shoot Jimmy. So eventually, um, Jimmy's trying to defend himself from Swansea, and as he's chasing you into the cockpit, you shoot him or you try to shoot him. And then Swansea ends up tied up. You like do this little like hallucination where Swansea's like chasing after you in this like graveyard. Um, and then Swansea ends up tied up, and as he's tied up, Jimmy's about to shoot him. He's like staring him down. And Swansea ends up doing like this monologue, and he's like, man, like I joined this for a better life. Like I have a kid back home and like a family back home, and like I thought this was gonna be a good life for me. And he's like, man, I just wish I could have gotten that kid like off this fucking rock, you know. And I think right there he's talking about Anya's baby actually, because I forgot to mention this earlier, but Anya ends up telling Swansea about like what happened, and you find out as I think you're Jimmy. I don't know if you're Jimmy or Curly, but you walk in and they're like talking about it. Um, and Swansea's kind of protective of like the rest of the crew compared to Jimmy, because as you play the game, you kind of find out Jimmy's a piece of shit. You know, especially towards like the later parts of the game, you're like Jimmy's like just saying shit, and you're like, bro, that's kind of fucked up, dude. Like, why are you doing that? You know? Yeah, Jimmy starts like gaslighting him, like just like he's like Daisuke, like you have to go through this vent, like the crew is counting on you, and Daisuke's like, I don't know, just once he told me not to go, and he's like, you have to do it, and he goes and he gets hurt and shit, and like he's kind of just like impairing the whole crew, you know. Um, but yeah. Anyway, Swansea's on his monologue, and he talks. He has a really cool monologue actually, and starts talking specifically to Jimmy, and you know he's like, "Fuck you, man," and then Jimmy shoots him. Um, and then at this point, right, there's Daisuke's dead. He got axed by Swansea. Um, Swansea's dead. He got shot by Jimmy. Anya's dead. She OD'd on pills, right? And this is like months after their impact. And also by this point, so now there's just Curly left, but also by this point, you kind of realize that it's like Jimmy who crashed the ship. Um, Especially because as you play, there's like subtle hints, but as you play, especially the days before, there's a scene where you're Curly and you go talk to Jimmy, and he's by the cockpit, and again he's like being a little jealous. He's like, "Oh, your feet are always cemented." He's like, "What am I supposed to do when I go back?" You know. And then another scene as Curly where you go to the cockpit and you see Jimmy sitting outside, and he's like, "Oh shit." And you're like, "What did you do, Jimmy? What did you do?" And then Curly goes and tries to stop the impact from happening. And then so at that point they just tell you, it like just shows you that Jimmy is responsible for it, but you could have known if you like pay attention to like the captain and co-captain side of the cockpit, I guess. Yeah, so it turns out Jimmy is the one who crashed the ship. um and he blamed Curly for it from the beginning, so the rest of the crew didn't know, right? So he's blaming Curly, and he's like, oh, we gotta take care of him even though he like kind of fucked us over. And like I said earlier, Curly's having these visions, or not Curly, Jimmy's having these like visions because he's kind of a loose cannon, and like he has this one where he picks up Curly, brings him to the table, and then he like chops his head off with the axe, which so far is just a vision, but after he basically kills everyone, or after everyone else is dead at least, he picks up Curly, takes him to the table in their like living space, their main area. Um, and at the table he has Anya and Swansea and Daisuke, and it's all their dead bodies there. And the imagery in this game is kind of crazy, but like in Jimmy's view, they're all like they're alive and they're participating. He puts Curly straight onto the table, and like he starts cutting him like he's a cake, dude, like their celebration or whatever. And yeah, basically he brings all their dead bodies there and he starts cutting them. And then he goes to this like crazy like vision. There's this crazy like horse part where you're like in the cargo bay and there's this like creepy ass horse ghost like um haunting the cargo bay, and it's like if you move it sees you and it gets you, but you have to like stay still whenever it's near you, otherwise it'll get you. And that thing is kind of freaky actually. um but yeah, he like you cut up Curly, and then I think that's when the horse part comes, and then afterwards you get to this like little area you walk to with like some lighting and a TV. I might have the order of that a little bit off, but um, this game is fucking crazy, dude. So you end up walking to this place, and there's like a little TV, and then across from the TV is like Curly, who's like strapped to this thing, and a bunch of like TVs around him. Um, and you can watch the TV. It's like a little commercial about like a kid like eating a steak or whatever. And so, like I said early, you cut off like a piece of Curly, and you feed him his own leg, which is wild. So it's like a little puzzle like mini game here. So you have to feed him his leg, and then like the little TVs around is like his digestive system, and you have to like make sure it like tracks the right way. Um, so it took me a little bit to get that. Basically, after you feed Curly his leg and you get it through his digestive tract, like the TV sucks you in, and Jimmy starts walking through the TV, and they start having this like conversation, like just Jimmy and Curly. And Curly's like, dude, just finish what you started, you know, like kill me or whatever. And Jimmy's like, no, like I can't. We're a team. Like I can fix this, you know. Like he's been saying that all game. He's like, I can fix this. Um, and Curly's like just it's my fault, like I'm gonna take responsibility finally. And like that's kind of a big thing throughout the game because Jimmy's been avoiding his responsibilities, and he's like, I'd rather die than like fucking take responsibility, you know. Yeah, Curly was like, I want to go home, and Jimmy's like, we are home, you know. Like, and that's the only home he knows. And Curly's like, dude, I'm still gonna be the villain, you know, like in your story. And Jimmy's like, no, dude. Jimmy ends up being like, oh, what, like it was an accident, and he's like, I'm sorry, like we were trapped, and he's like, I'm sorry. He finally like kind of takes some responsibility. He's apologizing to Curly, who's like fucking sitting on a chair on fire at this point. Um, and then the next part's kind of weird. You like go into another one of Jimmy's visions where he's like in these events and like doing like sonography or something. It says take responsibility, and like examining this like beating like organ, and it's like a baby in there. So like, kind of giving birth to like the baby stuff with Anya still. Um, and then he goes through more of his like hallucinations, and then he ends up picking up Curly, and it's now 0 days till Judgment Day, which Judgment Day has just been this thing that's been like building up over the game. Now it's 0 days to Judgment Day, and you pick up Curly, you walk him over to the cryopod, you put Curly in the cryopod, so Jimmy, the perspective switches, when he starts to put Curly in the cryopod, and now you're viewing as Curly. So he puts you in the cryopod, and then Jimmy has the gun, and then he kills himself. Um, which he's like, you can tell them everything that happened. Which is kind of fucked up because Curly's like barely alive. And it's just kind of torture for him. But yeah, and then the game ends. It was pretty wild shit. This whole thing feels like a fever dream, if you ask me. But it was really good. I really enjoyed this game. That was pretty unique. I like the perspective shifts it has, especially once you play the game and then you realize kind of what's going on. You start to see how like some of the more subtle things start to show. And I was worried like everyone was off their gourd, and like, but no, it was mostly just Jimmy, and he's just been like kind of an asshole like throughout the whole thing. I would definitely recommend this game if you think you'd like it. So after the game ends, this thing popped up, showing like the devs other games. So the devs made like a previous game called How Fish is Made, and I saw that the game wasn't very long, so I was just like, okay, I'll just check it out. It also had Curly's like model in it. I don't know if it's like Curly canonically or just his like model in game model for mouthwashing. But I ended up playing How Fish is Made as well, and that game was kind of cool. You play as a fish, you flop around, and all the fish are trying to decide whether to go up or down at the end of their like journey. And so you talk to them, you have influence over some of them, and some of them are like, I only go down, or some are, I only go up. There's one part where you find this really big fish who was like taken over by a parasite. So the parasite is like his tongue, and the parasite is the one talking to you. He starts singing. He does a whole music video for you and starts like singing to you, which is insane to watch. Actually, I was like, what the fuck. Also, this game is free. How Fish is Made is free, so check it out if you want. Um, but yeah, anyways, a parasite music video happens, and then you continue through. You get to choose if you want to go up or down. I went up, and then it said I landed on something soft. So yeah, um, whatever happens there. I don't know what happens if you go down, but I went up. There's also one point where like there's a fish stuck in a condom, and he like died in semen. There's another fish being like, "Oh, I wish I could do that." The fish is like, "Oh, dude, this guy was like blessed," Yeah. And then, so after you pick, there's actually an expansion to How Fish is Made, which is also not very long, but I played that one too. And that one's like you have like you're like rotting or something. You're like your ooze is growing, and you turn into this like goo ball, and you start absorbing everything around you, which is kind of fun to roll around, and you absorb some big fish, and you become one giant organism. You start consuming the beings around you and the garbage and just whatever you can find. And then at the end of that one, like you get into this big ball, and you end up consuming Curly. You see like his head, like his model, and you end up consuming him too, which is kind of fun. So yeah, overall, good stuff. I really enjoyed it. Would recommend. Um, yeah, peace out.